I'm waiting for it. Does your thing say that it's working?
It says live up in the corner.
That's great. That means anybody can watch us right now on the internet. I made this joke with Nicole Ryby. She was like, I guess. Because it's live. It literally is live. Anyway, welcome Annie Selak again to the podcast. This is kind of a strange week because we've got, well, it's strange, but not that strange because we have the Revised Common Lectionary and the Catholic Lectionary aren't necessarily matching up this week. And you're Catholic, but I wasn't sure which one you were going to go with today or this week. And maybe I convinced you to do both. I don't know. what have you?
Lectionary it
is. So what sort of has drawn you so far in the?
Yeah. So at this point, I'm still in the midst of kind of writing and forming and have the big thoughts. But as soon as I read the gospel for this week, the part that stood out to me is talking about a church divided. So if a kingdom is divided against itself, that kingdom cannot stand. And if a house is divided against itself, that house will not be able to stand. And to me, I think, one, studying ecclesiology and studying the church, but two, just the state of the church, whether we look at that as a specific denomination or kind of uniting themes across denominations. I think it's a very divided church right now. And so that just really stood out to me as that this is a topic that I think oftentimes we look at as a contemporary topic, that the church that's divided is a brand new issue. And clearly, if this is in the Gospels, this is
not
a theme that has long been present. So I think I really wanted to just be able to look in the scripture and really be able to sit with that and pray with that and see what's there for us that can speak to us today.
Yeah, not that it's great to always mix preaching and politics, but thinking about like election conversation has been going on. Oh my goodness. It is hot right now. And but it's also been sort of hot, like, you know, because there's like the right or whatever has been sort of divided on certain topics, but it's because it's a large, you know, they're stereotypically like a fundamentalist Christian type of group, but those Christians are having these stark divides that are starting to like they're in the same building and there's things that politically they're really getting torn up over. But like you said, we act like it's new. But it's not really new.
Yeah.
new. And I mean, I'm not super up on Mark, but I mean, what do you think? I mean, what do you think is going on, at least like contextually in Mark? Is it?
I feel like I'm back in my MDiv comp.
You don't really think about Mark as the gospel. Yeah, well, but like it's Mark, you don't think of it as the big controversial. I mean, it's controversial for different reasons, but you don't think of it as like the us versus them kind of book. Matthew might be a little bit more of that, or even Luke even more. So like, I know, I feel like I need to pull out the synopsis right now and be like, what is
Mark's written for a Gentile audience, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of Mark is looking at how to explain Jewish traditions and customs. And so I think with that, there's naturally set up kind of an insider-outsider point of view. Right, and so that's kind of if we're looking at like the very brief overview of Mark, I'd say that's it. And so, you know, I think that insider-outsider translates a lot to like house divided, and even I think there's this tendency today, and I think it's a human tendency to want to create like we, whoever we define we as, the small group, like we're on the inside and we truly get it. and this other group is outside, and whether it's by their customs or their beliefs or what style of liturgy and music they like, all these different markers that we do create this insider-outsider dynamic. So I think that's also like part of it, that I think is an important context that looking at the context of Mark's brings, but also just today of how are these insider-outsider divisions really present? And looking at like thinking of issues of immigration. And I made the mistake of reading letters to the editor in a Catholic Voice newspaper, in a diocesan newspaper. And I mean, it was this horrible letter about how, you know, the Catholic Church talks about immigration, but do we realize that these immigrants are illegal? And because they're illegal, like, we shouldn't welcome them. So I think in that way, like, it's a very present topic. And this is someone, a Catholic parishioner writing to a Catholic newspaper, right? And so feeling very called from her tradition to voice this need. And so that's a very stark insider-outsider topic. But then I even think of in parishes the way we create that, when there isn't that kind of stark, easy to see insider-outsider, but how do we create inner circles? And I think sometimes that's good, right? Like, we want a sense of belonging, and familiarity and family, and so many of these things that are good concepts, but can also lead to exclusion. And it's kind of inclusion at the expense of others, which is never true inclusion and not a gospel value, I would say.
Mm-hmm. Well, and it's interesting that I mean, there's always these paradoxical sort of setups in the Gospels where, you know, like you said, Mark, you're an insider when you're reading Mark. You know what's coming, or you know how it's kind of gonna go. But then you have this passage here that's basically saying, "Don't do that." So even though it's set up that way, it's kind of well, I don't want to say shaming you, but like it's also almost reconciling that paradox a little bit, where like the story and the narrative are set up to catch your attention, but remember, it's not just about that. It's not just us and them. It's there's more to it than that. Well, I mean, in a sense, that's a pretty good sort of better understanding of the context. And you sort of applied it a little bit with immigration, and I mean a little bit about sort of the a little bit about ecumenism and well, more like inter-Christian, or what is I get the words mixed up. There's
so ecumenism is about Christian religions, and then dialogue is
interreligion or inter yeah, gotcha. And you kind of had a little bit of a charge talking about, you know, this Catholic person writing a Catholic newspaper, and you're Catholic, so and I'm Catholic. So how do we sort of bridge, like, where do you, like, is there an answer in here somewhere? Like, how do we kind of bridge it?
I think there's hope, right? So there's not a clear answer in terms of like an exact way to go forth. But I think there's many different ways, because I'm even aware of, in my example, right, of this letter to the editor, I'm now creating this like us-them dynamic of like, look, I clearly understand immigration and this woman doesn't, right? So it's now I think there's also some ways we can really look to themes of scripture and see, like scripture clearly has really big on us about immigration. But even I think in my approach to this, there are times that I think there's a natural tendency to want to push the other side out as wrong. And that's not the call of the gospel. And I think that's what this reading is really calling us to do. So I think there's something there. Yeah, what was your original question? I'm sorry.
Whoa, sorry. I think like you paused or something.
It looks like.
Or it didn't pause. It lags.
Mm-hmm.
It like lags and tries to catch up. Let's just
Yeah.
take a moment for Google to figure it out.
Sorry to our live audience.
What were you about to say?
So what was your original question? I think I lost track of it. I just got excited.
Oh my gosh. Totally gone. I don't know why your technical difficulties are. Are you good?
I can hear you. Can you?
Oh, you're are you good? Do you hear me?
I can hear you.
Sort of.
Okay.
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, I can.
It's just a little like I feel like it's a little slow. Otherwise, we're good.
Okay.
Okay, let's try it again.
Okay. What was your question?
Boop, boop, ba-doo.
I can hear you singing, but that's all I've gotten.
Are you good?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Oh, I just asked. You were about to say something, but I like lost. Oh, so okay. So what I was gonna say. Let's try this again. So what I was gonna say was, we were talking about sort of this kingdom divided against itself, and I don't know if you're going to or if you're not going to, but the Catholic lectionary this weekend is the feast of Corpus Christi.
Mm-hmm.
I guess sort of making up for I guess Jesus getting lost in Easter somehow. There's this feast, you know, a couple weeks after Pentecost to make up for that. And I guess I was reading a little bit and I wondered because I knew that a lot of first communions are coming up and things like that. But just the idea as a unifying thing.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that's something? I mean, is that something that's here?
So I got Eucharist unifying. Is that something that, and then you froze. Ooh, you're really frozen this time.
Do 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 do. Man, I'm tired. All right, let's try this again.
Okay.
Maybe that's why we're having problems. There's all kinds of live people trying to get in.
We're very popular.
Well, it seems like it's cut up for the moment.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, luckily, I'm not planning it. We don't have to talk that long.
Okay.
But I was saying, the idea of Eucharist as a unifying sort of factor within Christianity. I don't know how far you can extend it, you know, beyond Christianity, or what your thoughts might be about that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think when I look to the Feast of Corpus Christi as connected to the Revised Lectionary, what I see is that Eucharist can be this not only symbol of unification, but also an act of unification as well, right? So the symbol actually enacts what it's representing, the definition of a symbol. But I think the Eucharist really, when we look at it and participate in it from the lens of justice, that I think that has a real pull on us towards unity, because the Eucharist demands action. The Eucharist is not something that remains in the church, but is something that we take with us in our lived bodies.
Mm-hmm.
We go out into the world and bring that out into the world, both literally and symbolically. So I think there's really a lot there that we can look at for that, of how does the Eucharist make demands on us as individuals, as communities, to bring about unity. I think that's a really important aspect of the Eucharist, that it has great demands on us. And so I think there's a big connection there between, this concept of unity and division, and where do we find hope in that? I think the Eucharist both gives us hope, and we find hope in the Eucharist. So I think it's pulling at us from both directions.
So what do you think? I'm with you as far as the Eucharist being a call to action, especially for justice.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm wondering about, there's clearly justice in the Mark passage from the Revised Common Lectionary. I'm just wondering, how to kind of pull that out a little bit more. Yeah, where's the justice? What are we looking? There's forgiveness in here too. It's jam packed.
Yeah, so I think part of it that I want to look at is the connection between justice and the Eucharist in the sense of Mass and being sent forth, right? So in the Catholic sense, which is the tradition I'm most familiar with, since it's my own tradition, Misa means to be sent forth and to go out. And so that's the whole purpose of Mass, is to bring this community together and to send us forth with the Eucharist. So I think that's a huge part of justice, is sending forth, that we're not just Mass is not an end in itself. In very Catholic terms, it is the source and the summit. It is what all of our actions are directed towards, and it's what all of our actions come from. So this sense of source and summit. So I think that's a very big part of it as well for me.
That's cool.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm looking forward to hearing how you tie whatever you tie together. Because I mean, the Mark passage is kind of tough, but I mean, when you start looking at all the, it's funny because the lectionary is supposed to make things easier in a certain sense, so you don't have to like just pull from anywhere. But sometimes it's just it's a tough week, you know. Trying to decide, or even for this day, it's just there's a lot to choose from, or you know, I'll usually have like like kind of the primary one you're preaching from, which may or may not be the gospel, and then see if there's any sort of connection between the others, because it seems like they often will kind of make sense together, sometimes not at all, or I'm like, I can't stretch that this week, you know. But is that something you kind of do, or do you like to stick with one? Or
yeah, I think it depends. For me, if I am preaching at a liturgy, I like blending all of it together. But I've noticed with the podcast, I really like kind of focusing more on one text, because I feel like people who are tuning into the podcast are kind of looking for something very specific. And so I feel like a greater pull towards to really go into depth on one section.
yeah.
Whereas if it's in a community, in a mass or in a night prayer service or something like that, I feel more of a need to pull everything that we've heard together. The other thing is, though, like I kind of really like the ones that are hard. So if there's one that I read and I think like I have no idea what this means for today, that's the one that I want to sit with more. Because sometimes the ones that seem obvious to me, it's easier for me to either like go to my canned, rehearsed, thoughts that I have, things that I say to everything. Or I guess it's just easier to keep it shallow, which I don't think is the point of preaching. And I think anytime there's this temptation to just go to something that we know really well, then that's not really getting to the depth of the gospel that there is. So I like the ones when I read, I'm like, no idea what this means, no idea how I'm going to work with this, because I do believe that the gospel has truth for us today and has meaning for us today. And so I like being able to sit with that and pray with that and wrestle with that and, think about it throughout my week, whether I'm like going for a run or doing errands, stuff like that, kind of have that just like marinating in my mind. So I like those types of things, those challenges too.
Do you ever find yourself sort of like, because I haven't preached a ton, but I found myself occasionally like thinking about something, and then I'll be like, oh, I preached on that, or I said something about this in a public setting. But I'm wondering, have you, like, when you're going to something new or something different, you kind of not necessarily automatically go to something you've already, it's like it's transforming in your mind a little bit. It's not exactly the same, but it's like you pushed it a little bit further than you thought you could.
Yeah, mine's almost the opposite process. So I start out with something that I think is like totally new and I've never thought this thing before. And then when I'm done with the homily, I'm like, oh, it's a homily on vocation. Like I think for 4 years, every homily I wrote was on vocation. And I love vocation. I think it's one of the most important messages today. But I think only once I set out to like write a homily on vocation. No, it's a really new, different topic. And then I come back to vocation, which I think is interesting. And I think definitely like an indication of where my life is at and where my, passions are. And, but I never set out to do that. But I'm sure if you read like a collection of everything I had written, you'd think, oh, did she just like copy and paste this? But I never realized that's what I was doing.
Yeah, and I think context makes it's interesting because like we sort of know what we know, and you enter into a different context and are like, I'm going to do something new and different, and you do sort of for that context, but it's but it's still in line with who you are or what your interests are, or maybe I mean, I hope to believe, like, by the grace of God, that it's for the audience that's there, not just your canned thing. And the podcast venue kind of gives you a little freedom to play with that a little bit more. That, like, I've thought of, I mean, there's all kinds of crazy things you could probably do with a podcast, preaching if you really wanted to, but I don't got time for that. Just sort of playing with the Gospels and seeing what can come together is enough for the moment, which seems like where you're at right now.
Yeah.
With all the things that you're doing. Is there anything else happening? Or is there anything else that, I mean, I know you just briefly looked at the gospel and we don't have to talk that much more. I was trying to, even listening to the last podcast that we did together, there wasn't, I mean, for everyone who might be listening, you should just go listen to that one if you want to know everything that there is to know about Annie. It's all there. It's all there in 1 hour. Amazing. But she's awesome, and she will be preaching for us very, very soon. I haven't. This is sort of a side note because I'm talking. You introduced me to a couple other people who I've been way behind the past. Like, it's today was my last day of school, but I still have work next week. So I'm feeling pretty good.
Well, congrats on getting to the last day of school.
Huh?
Congrats on getting to the last day of school.
I know. I got back and I was like, podcast time. How was finishing up first year?
Yeah, I'm really glad I never have to go through a first year of doctoral studies again. It was a difficult semester, but I think it will be the hardest semester that I take. Nice to have that behind me. I'll go from taking 4 classes to 3 classes, which will be nice.
Oh yeah.
So it was very difficult, but I mean, it's crazy how for a PhD program it's 5 years, and that's really daunting. But then when you break it down, I'm halfway done with coursework, and I only have to take 6 more classes. So that's also very daunting to think of, like, wow, I have so much more to learn, and I only have 6 classes to learn that in. And
oh wow, yeah.
So it's interesting to see how it breaks down, and I'm very much looking forward to being in an environment where I know the context, I know the people. I think it's just more enjoyable for me to be in a community that's known, and I think easier to navigate a doctoral program when you know all the personalities at play and kind of the lay of the land, and that everything's not new.
And not to mention large life events that will be, will be completed or beginning at the end of the summer.
Yeah, so I'm very much just looking forward to, not having to be a first-year student and planning a wedding.
I feel you.
To a new part of the country and all those sorts of things at once. More manageable positions.
I totally feel you.
Yeah.
It's a huge sort of weight off your shoulders when, like, it's like you can breathe again. You're like, I'm a normal human being again. Like, I'm not a bride anymore. This is great.
Yeah.
Nobody looks at you with, like, bride eyes all the time. Well wishes with the rest of the summer, taking more classes and the wedding. I'm sure it'll be awesome. Thanks for doing this amidst all the craziness.
Oh yeah, no, I really enjoy doing this. It's a good practice for me. When I think of like spiritual practices and that, I think of preaching, and so it's a really good practice for me to keep going. So I get a lot of it out of it as well.
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't know if you're going to want to preach before if another time in the summer or
Probably not.
Yeah, probably not. I wouldn't ask you. But I mean, in the fall or the spring, we'll I will keep you in mind
Great.
if you're up for it. Great. I send my updates as I can.
Great.
But thanks again. Have a good rest of your day.
Thank you so much. Congrats on making it to the end of the year.
I know. I feel so good. It's finally. But yeah, thanks. Have yeah, good summer. I feel like this is the longest goodbye ever. It's just,
I know. It's okay though.
I cut like half of it out in the but anyway, I'll end it now, but so what are you just